A big thanks to our sponsors who make the pudding possible.
The American Camp Association of Illinois is made up of nearly 289,000 members, volunteers, campers, families, and professionals who believe in the power of camp. They work to disrupt the effects of poverty by providing fundamental services for children and families and learning opportunities for camp professionals. Learn more about ACA Illinois by visiting acail.org. You know the impact you want to make in a child's life, but figuring out the day-to-day details can be overwhelming. Let Camptivities help you make that impact by streamlining the creation of your camp activity schedules. Schedule a demo at camptivities.com.
Welcome to the pudding.
The sweet proof of research to back up what you already know about summer camp. Hi, I'm Dr. Mandi Baker. My pronouns are she, her.
And I am Travis Allison, he, him, and il.
Today, we're talking to Herschel Singer, he, him, from JCamp 180. He's a consultant there, also known as Manager of Research Evaluation.
We're happy to be there.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Herschel. We want to kick off knowing that this is a podcast about camp research. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to research and how you became a researcher?
Yeah, sure. So the truth is, I sort of fell into it, from my university and graduate education. I was always kind of intrigued and enjoying a lot of my psychology classes, my evaluation and classes of all statistics, all of that kind of stuff. I always just found it exciting and enjoyable. And then for field work during graduate school, I worked with an organization in the Boston area to really help them overhaul their evaluation process and framework, building out logic models, all that kind of fun stuff. And that led me eventually to working at the Harold Grinspoon Foundation, of which JCamp 180 is a program of. I started really helping them think about research and evaluation and working on that area with PJ Library, which is one of our hallmark programs, giving away free Jewish children's books around the world. And as I was doing that, learned that we had access to this really fantastic piece of software called Tableau, which is a data visualization software. Started playing with that more and more and realizing not only is it a lot of fun, but it's incredibly powerful and allows you to drive insights in a way that was just exponentially greater than looking at thousands of rows of Excel sheets. Not that I don't love Excel. Believe me, I love Excel too. But, getting to get to that visual level was a sort of a game changer. So that led me to become the analytics manager for the foundation, which I did for a few years. And then an opportunity came up on the JCamp team to go back over there. And Jewish camp, camping in general, really, it was the thing that led me towards the career path that I find myself on. So the opportunity to get back into that space more explicitly, get to work with people and data, not just data, was exciting to me. And to really focus that sort of applied research and learning in the camp field just felt like kind of icing on the cake. So I've been on that team now for just over 2 years, and it's been terrific.
You'd be surprised how many people start by saying, I fell into research. It wasn't intentional. And also, a lot of the folks we get to talk to are saying, and I just knew camp was pretty special. So I'm glad that those two worlds collided in some magical way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Herschel, I want to catch this before we get too far. I love the work that you do, the style of the work that's done at JCamp 180. Can you just give us the overview for those who don't know it?
Yeah, absolutely. So JCamp 180, we really focus on strengthening the long-term organizational effectiveness and financial sustainability of nonprofit Jewish camps all across North America, really looking to ensure our community's future and connection to Judaism through. So we do that work in a few different ways. We partner with both professional staff and lay leadership, national movement, and allied organizations. We work to inspire a culture that really promotes philanthropic support and focus on strategic planning, governance, and fundraising as areas to really clue in on. And we do that through providing matching grants, consulting services, professional development opportunities, research, networking. We have an annual conference that just ran, and additional resources. So that's the elevator pitch of it all.
Well, and I think one of the interesting practical things that the JCamp 180 does is give money, but you have to take a consultant with the money.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting philanthropic model that Harold Grinspoon, our founder of the Grinspoon Foundation, came up with when he wanted to get more deeply involved in Jewish camping, which was to say we want to be making grants and give camps that capacity, but then pairing that with no-cost consulting was really kind of a difference maker, I think, to allow camps
Agreed.
to not only have the resources they might need to continue the work they're doing, but to have that sort of support in kind of a perpetual way. So when JCamp takes on a camp, we're pretty much with them from then on. We have a dedicated team of relationship managers. One of the roles that I play is a relationship manager. I have a portfolio of 17 camps. They know that they can come to me with any questions they might have, whether that's how exactly do I fill out this grant report, or we have this big question swirling around this strategic planning thing, or can you help us think about how to design a board retreat, or anything in between. It might be me who delivers those services, or it might be someone else on our team. So it's sort of like a hub and spoke model, but we really make sure to be there in sort of a concierge level way for the camps to really support them and whatever needs they might have.
Yeah, it's such an amazing resource for your camps. Every time I hear more about it, I'm more excited.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the kind of research you do. So you talked about Excel. I'm assuming you're a bit of a numbers guy. You were talking about data earlier when we were having a chat. If you were trying to explain that kind of research to somebody who doesn't know it, what are you doing? What does that look like? What kind of research are you doing?
Just to make it easier, let's call that person Travis and go from there.
So we do a lot of different research, and I will say that it's not exclusively quantitative. So we are definitely looking at the numbers, but we also will run focus groups. We've done an interview series this past fall. We're definitely looking to kind of take a mixed methodology approach to be able to contextualize some of what the data might be saying. You know, being in the camp world, we're not some big data software company that's getting tens of millions of rows of data that you can then do all these sorts of fancy data-driven regression thing. Yeah. So we have to make sure that what we're seeing fits a little bit with the narrative we're hearing and go back and forth. So I definitely think that mixed methodology approach is really helpful in our field and certainly in our work in particular. Like I said, we focus on really organizational effectiveness, financial sustainability. So a lot of what we look at are around the business model of camp, trying to understand how costs are changing in the market, try to understand how that looks relative to inflation. We also do a lot of work supporting camps around development work. So making sure to also think about the revenue side. How are things growing or changing? And how are people really being supported to have the data that they might need to be able to put their case for support forward in the best way possible? Think about long-term implications, whether that's around multi-year budgeting or anything else. So a lot of what we do is pretty applied research, I would say. Mm-hmm. We're not doing a lot of kind of theoretical white paper sort of work, although I find that stuff fun too. A lot of it is in part reacting a service to the camps when they have particular consulting needs. Another big piece that we might do is we have access to some really good data. We partner with the Foundation for Jewish Camp in their annual camp census, which gets a whole host of different data points about Jewish camps day and overnight all across North America. And then we're able to use that data to aggregate and anonymize comparison groups. So if camps want to understand, are we getting a good deal on laundry? Are we getting housed on laundry? Like we can say, well, relative to your region, here's some of the things we're seeing. And that's not to say, and this is actually a really important point that I often turn to, is I don't believe that we're in the business of being data driven. I really believe we're in the business of being data informed. I don't think that our system, our business needs to necessarily look at data to the exclusion of other decision-making heuristics, if you will. But I do think that data needs to have a seat at the table. So when we do those sort of benchmarking analysis pieces, we make sure to say, first of all, these are reported numbers. We're not going into the budget and seeing every single little number, but this is what we're hearing. This is what is being reported in. And contextualize this within your own needs. Have this inform your decision-making, have it be a place to ground your discussion, but don't not think about other factors and other ways to think through needs and decisions.
Yeah, it's so many camps don't have even the data at the table. So it's great to help people take that step. So I think that's really interesting. In the work that you have done yourself in your own research work, do you have something that's like a proud accomplishment or something that you've worked out through your research that you're really excited about?
Yeah, there's a couple things, but the one that really comes to mind is some of the work that we've been doing just most recently. a partner of mine in JCamp and we've been doing a lot of research and trying to look into better understanding kind of the economic landscape of camping and specifically Jewish overnight camping.
Yeah.
What we've been hearing anecdotally, certainly since COVID, but truthfully even before, is that costs feel like they're running wild. Things are just getting harder and harder to figure out to make budget. And it's a really tough time. So we heard that kind of anecdotally enough that we wanted to start to better understand that. We also saw that be the number one ranked trend in an annual trend survey that we run, seeing rising costs, rising really to the top, even above things like high levels of anxiety and mental health challenges amongst campers or staff, or pressure on young adults to earn income and build their resumes. So we knew that this was an issue. We were hearing it from different, angles. So we really wanted to look in to that area and just get a little bit more of a sense, not just of the qualitative, but really that like what are the numbers saying? So we've done a lot of research on that. And the truth is, it's a bit more of a mixed bag than we expected. There was not some sort of silver bullet or say, yes, costs are going crazy and revenues are keeping up. So there's a lot of kind of nuance in what we found. But what it really led to, again, thinking about the way that we do work as consultants, it led us to think about a new service offering that we could start to pilot, which we just launched this past week at the Jewish Camp Summit, which is really focused on building more holistic financial sustainability. The way that we're thinking about what that means is almost like the intersection of a Venn diagram between strategic planning and budgeting. So it's a little bit more quantitative than just strategic planning alone might be. And it's a little more systems oriented and holistic than just a budgeting process might be. So, we're going to see where it goes. The camps that we're working with know that this is a pilot, that we're kind of building the plane as we fly it. But it's really exciting to just the response that we've had, really elevating these issues. We spoke about the shifting economics of camp, spoken about from the plenary floor. People are really engaged to start to hear this kind of rise to the level that it's getting in terms of focus.
And when we're thinking about impact of camp versus the amount of money, it's incredibly important to be thinking that for the long term.
For sure. Well, like that leads me to another question, which is, how do you think the research is impacting JCamp programs? How do you see it translating all the way out to your camps and what they're doing out there?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. Like I said, through this research, what we realized was that camps are pretty heterogeneous. That while we could see what the median surplus might be, there are some camps that frankly are killing it, and there are some camps that are really dragging. And the idea of finding the one thing that was going to make a difference, we pretty quickly realized it's not going to happen. And really starting to think more about what is needed from a sustainability perspective was how we decided to kind of continue the approach. So what we really look to do with our research is understand better kind of how we can be of service to our clients and our partner camps. So it's not research for research's sake, but as we figure this out, we're always driving towards the so what, now what of things. Right?
Yeah.
This is interesting. So what? What are we going to do with it? So that's one way that we do that. And then again, like I said, a big part of the consulting work that I end up doing is building a lot of these benchmark dashboards that whether it's for movement partners that are running a whole host of camps or small independent camps, they have different needs and different dimensions of the data that they like to understand and see it through. And we have the opportunity to provide them with that. So giving them that sort of data, again, to anchor their discussions and really have a good starting point, we've seen to be really beneficial. And we've got really a lot of good feedback on kind of that new approach that we've been building out for the past couple of years.
That's
Herschel,
amazing.
can you take a second, talk about what you mean by dashboard? I just want to make sure that folks who are listening, who haven't experienced that or had a consultant or helper come in.
I mean, so probably if you've driven a car, you've seen the dashboard on your car. And that's actually a great example of what a dashboard is. It's visual indicators that help you to understand kind of how systems of note are functioning, right? So as you're driving, you might want to see a quick speed check of how fast are you going, or is my car overheating or not? So really what a dashboard is looking to do is present data visually. And then there's a whole series of different wireframing exercises you might do and understanding what goals do you have and what objectives are those going to be and what metrics actually inform those objectives. And the wireframing is like, how do you actually place things out? And there's a lot of science on the way that people read across pages and how much spacing and the use of color. So, I could nerd out on the intricacies of dashboard design for a while. But really, at its basic, it's a visual representation of data. If you think about a bar chart, maybe you need to have two to call it a dashboard versus just a single chart. But a couple representations of data visually could be a dashboard, absolutely. And I think what it really allows you to do is start to have a conversation about what's going on here much faster rather than having to have a conversation about what am I even looking at? Like, how do I get to that? So that's really the skinny of what a dashboard is.
Did you know that ACA Illinois' primary work is getting young people to camp from communities that don't traditionally attend? This includes providing services to 9,000 kids and adults from low-income communities throughout the state of Illinois annually. ACA Illinois has deep roots in using camp as a way to create social change in local, state, and national communities, including creating equitable access for all children to attend camp. ACA Illinois loves to try new things and believes it's how we create the most dynamic impact for our campers, staff, and community. This is why ACA Illinois always jumps at the chance to collaborate with content experts and countless volunteers to develop new and innovative programming. Ready to help us achieve this mission? Join us at acail.org. Are you a camp professional looking for community? Are you a camp interested in accreditation but don't know where to start? Are you looking to grow your career? Are you looking for ways to give back? Reach out to us at info@acail.org and let's get you connected. Scheduling affects every camper and every staff member's summer. It's easy to make mistakes. It takes a ton of time. The bottom line, scheduling is hard. But it doesn't have to be. Let Camptivities help you create a balanced and engaging schedule without the mistakes and without those long days and late nights. Camptivities does it all. Auto scheduling, camper scheduling, group scheduling, elective scheduling, manual adjustments, over 60 different reports, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. Now is the time to find a better way to schedule this summer. And don't wait, next summer will be here before you know it. We'd love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let us help you get away from your desk and back out to camp.
Can I ask a question about the dashboard? What kinds of stuff is pretty typical on a camp's dashboard?
Yeah.
Things are they measuring?
And it would depend, I would say, on the audience, whether this is a dashboard that you're creating as more of an executive level roll up for your top professional or for your board, or whether this is sort of an analyst level dashboard for your maybe assistant director who's neck deep in enrollment and recruitment. So, you kind of have to get the lens right for the level of aggregation that you're doing of the roll up of data. But the three areas that we most often are providing support in would be 1, enrollment, 2, development fundraising, and 3, overall finances. So things like understanding how are your budget to actuals trending. That might be really interesting and easy for 1 or 2 of your board members. And then the rest of them might say, I have no idea how to think about this. But if you create them a chart that's really intuitive and easy to understand, I would say as a general rule, if you can't get the story that a dashboard is trying to tell you within 5 seconds, it's not a very good dashboard. It should be really intuitive, like what is the story here? And then how do we kind of move from there? A good dashboard could be dynamic. You could have filters on the side and kind of investigate things further. But the idea is that it brings that sort of speed to insights to a whole different level. And it allows people to kind of engage with topics that they might feel a little bit hesitant to otherwise engage in. So whether that's enrollment trends over time, how are your 7th grade bunk trending? Do you have a bubble coming up? Are you expecting in January? We always see West Coast people filtering in. So even though we're down below, we're going to see that big bump come up, different things like that. But again, it would depend on the audience and it would kind of depend on the level of in the weeds you need to be.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I want to talk to you is knowing that you are working directly, but you also have a big overview of the camps that are submitting information. What sort of trends are you, other than the worry about finances and expenses, what other trends are you noticing across all of the camps that you're talking to, or yourself in conversation with the foundation, like
Yeah.
Foundation for Jewish Camps versus JCamp 180?
Sure. So I think that one thing we've been seeing, and it does in a way roll back to some of the financial stuff, but
Yeah.
is there's sort of a difference in how we're thinking about staffing nowadays. There's a lot more adults at camps that I think previously we had seen. So we see that, again, from our lens, we're thinking about that from the long-term sustainability, organizational development side of camping. So whether that's around capital needs for more adult housing, whether that's thinking about the salaries that a licensed mental health counselor is going to be commanding versus a 18-year-old seasonal staff person. So we see the ratios of camper to adults to counselors has shifted a bit. We see a lot of the international staff, especially in California. There's a new minimum wage law where you have to pay overnight camp counselors minimum wage. It's really changed the way that they're thinking about staffing, and also about the year-round team. How are camps growing or thinking about their year-round team? A lot of camps reduced their teams over COVID. Unfortunately, had to let go or furlough some folks, and not all of those camps have necessarily brought back the same number of staff. They've combined roles. They've kind of made it work. So that's something that we have seen a lot. Another thing that we've been hearing more and more about, and again, I know it keeps coming back a bit to this most recent research, but I've been head first into this stuff. So it's the lens I'm seeing a lot of things through right now. But another big thing we're hearing about, and we've got some recent data on it as well, is around deferred investments. So that might be around staff that people haven't rehired or, built their teams to the way they want to be. That's around capital that they might be doing the bare minimum sort of maintenance of, okay, this roof is actually leaking like crazy. We need to fix the roof, as opposed to saying this roof is going to be gone in a few years. Let's do preventative maintenance. So we're seeing a lot of deferred capital expenses and deferred program expenses that people are not feeling that they can invest in the same way towards the dynamic programs that they've been creating. So of course, camp's still rocking. Like camps are still doing great, but they've had to figure out these ways to keep up. And one of the ways that we've seen has been through this deferred investment, whether on the people side or the camp side.
Right. Are there little lessons or things? I mean, I appreciate you talking about the bigger trends, but are there surprises that you found in there or things that you find?
I guess I wouldn't say that this is a surprise, but it's really just very heartening to see how resilient and resourceful the camp pros are. These professionals are doing way more, I think, than what the camp professional, camp director job was, call it 15, 20 years ago. Then you were running a camp, right? You got to run a camp and think about camp. And now you're really running like an organization, like a multifaceted, multi-vertical organization that has to be thinking about fundraising in pretty different ways than maybe 10, 20 years ago. The amount of work you need to be doing with the board, all of the additional sorts of needs I just feel really heartened by is the tenacity and grit and simultaneously the joy that these camp pros bring. Getting to be in the ballroom of over 1,000 people at the camp summit last week, you could just you got to feel that camp energy, which I had been in really since the summer. So again, I don't know that that was surprising, but it was really reaffirming to know like we're in a pretty good business here.
Well, I think almost stole the answer from the next question, but you told us about the Jewish Camp Summit just last week in Chicago, and I wanted to ask you for what was your very highest highlight?
Oh, my very highest highlight, I don't know. The Jewish Camp Summit was a really terrific opportunity for us at JCamp 180 to partner with the Foundation for Jewish Camp and their Leaders Assembly Conference. So it ran almost the whole week from Sunday through late Wednesday night, just jam-packed with all sorts of sessions and plenaries. I think that for me, I had another session that I ran about implementing a data culture in your camp. I really think that the culture aspect of data gets lost too often. People think about the data aspect of data, but if you don't think about the people, the hearts and minds that you need to bring in, then you could have the best dashboard out there. You could have the most fancy data analysis. It's not going to do much if you don't think about the people, think about the behaviors, think about the culture. So I had a chance to present a session about that. And truthfully, I thought nobody was going to come. Like, why would they come to this date? And it was packed. It was standing room only. People stayed. They really enjoyed it. So that felt really good to know that the stuff that I'm so deep into about all the data pieces were really resonating for people across the spectrum, whether that was lay leaders or directors of national movements or assistant directors of camp or anyone in between.
Yeah. I think that echoes our sort of intention and motivation when we thought about this podcast originally, was that there needs to be a culture around this. It would need to be about the hearts and minds and how they make sense out of what information can be available to them. So that's wonderful. Like you said, affirming it's great to connect with kindred spirits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Herschel, what part of camp is not getting enough study but should get some more attention?
It's interesting, but as I think about it, I think that really getting a better sense of the parents of camp
Yes.
might be a
yes.
really interesting place. So I think I mentioned before, but we at JCamp, we've been running for about 6 years now, our annual societal trends survey to understand, how trends are affecting camps, both in opportunities and threats. And each year we ask a few extra questions on that. So a couple years ago, actually, we had a community of practice that was going called the Camp Data Advisory Group, CDAG for short. And somebody there, he had this great idea of asking this question about basically joy and joy sucking. It was saying, like, what are the things that bring the most joy to your job? And what are the things that take the most out of you, that like suck the joy out from you? And what was really interesting was parents was absolutely like the joy sucking thing that people
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to think about the rise, or maybe the continuation at this point, of helicopter and snowplow parenting, the pressure that young adults might feel potentially from parents to need to build their resumes or quote unquote get a real job, that sort. So I don't know exactly what the research question would be, but better understanding the experience of parents within camping, I think would be a really interesting. It would certainly be interesting to me. I would love to read that study. And I do wonder if there could be any sort of, from an application standpoint, I don't know if that's some sort of marketing approach or some sort of just education for parents to really better fully understand how valuable camp can be and how much more so it can be when they're able to let go and have that trust that they're sending.
Yeah.
And it should be, it's like, as a longitudinal study, that would be incredibly impactful, because anecdotally, parents have changed a lot. But I would be interested in the impression versus the reality.
Yeah, I just read The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt's new book. And it just got me thinking, like, camp is the answer. Like, you'd have all these problems. It's camp. It's camp. Like, it's camp. So, I know that we all know that, but it just makes me think about, what does it look like to better understand, crack this nut of the parents around the difficulty that sometimes camp professionals have. You got to run like a professional Photoshop nowadays, right? There's so much more that you need to be presenting, and kind of the feedback loops, the cycle times are getting shorter and shorter. So again, I think a longitudinal study would be really interesting. Just thinking about that role of parents, I guess, especially in overnight camping, but really in both. I think day camping, there's a little bit less of that need because you're going to see your kid back each night. But that's kind of an interesting question to me.
I've had the weird experience of becoming a camp parent much later in life, because we lived in Australia until fairly recently. And so I do remember, I don't even know if I had kids at my PhD defense, one of the examiners said, "Will you send your kids to camp?" And I just felt myself really off guard. Generally, we don't ask very personal questions in those situations. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to answer this. And so sending my kids to camp when we moved to Canada, and going through the process of being a parent and having analyzed some of this and going, oh my goodness, I'm living it now. Am I that parent? Am I the one who wants to call every night and check in? And just try to make some, process that. And somewhere in that PhD, I read Nicholas Rose, and he was writing in the 70s about the anxious generation and what parents were doing to create this thing. So having all of that in my head and trying to be really cool. So I think it'd be an amazing study. I think there's so much to learn. I do have that mantra to be cool, be cool. Okay, don't be one of the cool moms. Don't try to keep it cool, because I think there's a lot to worry about, and we're certainly fed a lot to worry about. But how does that translate into how we actually parent our children. Well, I do have another question for you, and that is, can you tell us, would you make a recommendation to another researcher that you think we should talk to?
Somebody that I had the chance to work on a research project with in graduate school. His name is Dr. Daniel Olson. He's the Assistant National Director of the Ramah Camping Movement.
Oh, cool.
Incredibly thoughtful, well-spoken guy, easy to talk to, really fun. He's doing a lot of great research around a whole host of areas for the Ramah movement. Would highly recommend getting in touch with him.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other question here is, if people want to find you and learn more about your research and get in contact, how do people find you? How do they find your work?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll say I'm proudly off of all social media at this point in my life, so you won't find me there. But you can email me at hsinger@hgf.org.
Thanks so much for being on, Herschel. We're really grateful.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. This was fun. Thanks so much.
Awesome. If you didn't know, now you know, Camp Pros.